So I watched Rise of the Beasts on preview night, and I've been ruminating on a lot of aspects of it, but I definitely know what my favorite part was. Can you guess what it is? Was it the action? Nope. Was it when the Maximals were introduced? Nope. Was it when fucking Unicron showed up and all his G1 glory was his melody playing in the background? Not even close. My favorite part was when Optimus, RC, Bumblebee, Mirage, and Noah were just sticking around and bantering in New York. You guys remember back in 2015 when Avengers 2 hit? Everyone said the movie was mid, but everyone loved the party scene. Hell, I remember people saying they wanted a movie of just that, and those New York scenes reminded me of that. Honestly, if they just made the whole movie with those 5 characters doing dumb shit, I would have liked it infinitely more. Actually, they did do a movie like that, and in my opinion, it was literally the perfect movie, especially for this franchise. Was it a combination of E.T. and Iron Giant? Yeah, so what? Great movies take from other great movies all the time, and I can think of more egregious cases of plagiarism. It's about how well they accomplish what they set out to do. Bumblebee had a simple-ass plot, but with its in-depth character work and heartfelt emotion, it actually brought tears out of me. Fucking movie about space robots literally made me cry. As a fan of this franchise ever since I was a drooling toddler, that is what I think the Transformers is about. There's a lot to like in Rise of the Beasts in that regard. I don't think Stephen Caple Jr. or the crew that worked on this movie forgot everything that Travis and I taught them. Mirage and Noah were definitely my second favorite human-transformer relationship in the live-action series, and Optimus finally has a fucking character arc. I love the idea of it, especially how it ties in with Noah, but in execution, I did feel it was a bit too tell not show, and they kept beating it over my head. Regardless, I'm so happy I don't have to listen to fucking
I am Optimus Prime, and I say pretentious shit that makes no sense
as much anymore. And believe it or not, from his reaction to Bee's death, I almost thought Optimus wanting to rip Scourge's damn spine out for killing our son. Almost. Dave vs. Prime still doesn't work for me in this one. Also, unfortunately, the character work and relationships are secondary to and sprinkled in between the action sequences instead of being the primary focus. One problem I have is how much action there is. I know, super controversial opinion. After all, according to the critics and average filmgoer, don't I show up to a Transformers movie just wanting to see robots punch each other to hell and back? Honestly, this is probably one of the things I hate hearing the most about this franchise. As alluded to earlier, the main draw of Transformers has never been the action for me. That's not what I consider the spectacle of the Transformers. The spectacle of the Transformers for me has been how human these robots can be. The emotions they can show, the little quirks each of them have, and the things they do always interest me far more than the punchy nature of them. It's why I've never minded humans being around them. When done correctly, it can illuminate the Transformers' human traits and even help develop them as actual characters, transcending their origins as Japanese action figures. I would piss off anime fans if I said Gundam's main draw was its space battles. It's beloved and survived for this long because of its thematic topics of war and tragedy, and its messages about them. What makes people stick around a franchise for this long is not how epic or huge it can become, but how memorable and distinct its more human elements are, such as its themes, characters, or even setting. That's why, even though the action sequences are arguably just as good as Bumblebee, they're not as memorable. Instead of being restrained in its quantity or scope, it becomes too big, too long, and there are just too many to remember them all, especially with the third act. To me, it doesn't feel like the Transformers. For example, there were a lot of episodes in G1 where the stakes are huge, but in execution, it's still presented in a way where there aren't a million tiny skeletons running around just for the Autobots to maim and kill and rip their damn spines out. Despite its cheap animation budget, they vary it up, present more personal one-on-one battles, and avoid dragging itself out to the point of being boring. My other issue with this film, and probably the biggest one, is how much it tries to set up the larger mythos, aka exposition. Like the action, the main draw of the Transformers for me has never been the lore. I don't need a 5-minute segment in the 1986 movie explaining to me that Unicron is the Chaos Bringer existing ever since the universe's conception. This is not fucking Lord of the Rings where every fucking species has a 100-page backstory to them. It's not even the MCU. I don't want to end up having multiverse stories overcomplicating the core basic premise of Autobots versus Decepticons. Lore is fun to talk about and should be an ancillary part of the story, but it should be ancillary. Honestly, this movie would work far better for me and more entertaining for me if Unicron, the Maximals, and or the Transwarp Key weren't in this movie. Because at the time devoted to these plot points, half the characters are relegated to being useless, bland, or just being exposition machines, which is a shame, especially when there are esteemed actresses that deserve far better. Despite my predisposition to disliking MacGuffins being the main story of any Transformers media, I'm not always against it, as long as the exposition is presented interestingly. I'm not a fan of the 2007 movie, but the Cube was handled so much better. There was an awesome voiceover from Optimus in the beginning. It actually showed its power several times at a smaller scale, and it was admittedly pretty cool how Bumblebee transformed it into a human-sized object. Here, it was just another fucking blue sky beam. Oh, and yeah, I hated the G.I. Joe crossover tease too. Overall, the direction they took with this movie, the unbalanced focus on action and lore at the expense of character, is my only real complaint. A lot of you are going to call me a little bitch for criticizing this movie as much as I have so far, but the choices they made really brought down my enjoyment. It's still better than the other 5 Bay movies, though it is far, far from being as good as Knight's movie. If you're going to take anything away from this video, I hope it's this. I don't hate this movie, but I fear what this movie entails for the rest of the franchise. Bumblebee sets up a rebooted cinematic universe where its distinction from other modern cinematic universes would be its focus on humanized robots and their relationships instead of its interconnectivity, action, or lore. That is what would make this franchise unique from other ones. In my opinion, this movie is just trying to set up another MCU, which is not what I believe the Transformers is about at its core. I don't want this to end up like the Fast and Furious franchise either, where people only watch it for its action sequences or stupidity. No, what I want people to take away from this franchise and remember it for is its beating human heart that has often overpowered its cynical corporate nature as a way to sell toys since the 80s. It's not Shakespeare, and it never will be Shakespeare. But amidst the noise of banging metal, there's so much more to this franchise than meets the eye. There's so much more I want to cover as a fan of this franchise, so please let me know if I've done a good job on my first ever sort of video. I'm eager to make more if people want to hear more of my spicy hot takes. Whether you agree or disagree, thank you so much for the time you've graciously given to me.